Hello and welcome everyone to this closing session of Nextv series Caribbean 2021. After spending the first part of the day discussing the latest developments and opportunities for the region's pay TV, wireless, OTT and Android TV operations, we're going to dedicate this panel to look at what's going on in the world of free-to-air television in the Caribbean. To do this, we have brought together the CEO, the managing director, and the head of TV from 3 over-the-air television stations operating in Barbados, Grenada, and Jamaica. They will really help us understand how broadcast TV networks are adapting their operations to new audiovisual consumption trends while simultaneously coping really with a very difficult advertising sales around the world, really a very difficult business environment that has affected virtually every single TV station relying on advertising sales around the world since the pandemic started, of course, over a year ago. So let me introduce our 3 distinguished guest speakers. We're actually waiting for one of them to join us. She's having some connection issues, but she is about to join us. So I will introduce her now, and once she joins us, she will already be introduced. She's Odette Best-Campbell. She's the managing director of Grenada Broadcasting Network. Founded in 1998, GBN is the largest broadcast network on the island of Grenada. It is jointly owned by One Caribbean Media, has a 60% shareholding, and the government of Grenada, which holds the remaining 40% of the company. The group actually owns and operates an over-the-air television channel, GBN TV, and 3 radio stations, Hot FM, Classic FM, and GBN Gospel. Jewel Ford is the head of TV at the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, founded in 1963 as Radio Barbados. Cbc Barbados is a public radio and television broadcaster. It owns and operates the country's only legally licensed over-the-air television channel, that's TV8, and also 3 radio stations, CBC Radio, V1, and Q100.7. The corporation also owns a wireless pay TV service called MCTV. Last but not least, Keith Campbell is the CEO of BBC Jamaica, established in 1997 by an act of parliament. The Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica has a mandate to disseminate news, information, and ideas on matters of general public interest produced by the government agencies that contribute to the education of the Jamaican audience. So welcome all of you. Again, we're going to wait for Odette to join us, hopefully in a few minutes. So in the meantime, let's start the conversation. And Jewel, CBC Barbados is a public broadcaster. And I think you like to describe your funding structure as an odd hybrid model. I think that's how you describe it. Can you explain how this works, and also how do you produce, or do you produce all content yourself? Do you also rely on external productions? Let's introduce in your words CBC Barbados, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Juan, and thank you to all the persons who've joined us. Our funding structure is an odd hybrid model because we're government owned, but we're not government supported except in major macro ways. So if we need to buy new equipment and phase out equipment that's at end of life, we usually apply to government for the funding to do that. But for our day-to-day operating expenses, we sell our content on the market. We have the MCTV, our multi-choice subscription service, cable service, in which that really is our bread and butter. That portion of our business is what pays our regular bills. But outside of that, we don't get money from government. So whereas a lot of public broadcasters are supported by government.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get a subvention, which is a monthly amount from government, or we are not included in estimates, which is where government discusses its budget and its revenue and how it's going to allocate that revenue. So that's why our hybrid model is a little different. But in these times, most terrestrial broadcasters, their funding is a mix of market, fundraising, and some government support. I'm sure Odette and Keith will tell you the same thing, because none of us can actually exist off of government funding alone, or off of the market alone, or off of fundraising like a PBS, and even they still have other marketing options to assist in selling their products. So they sell content, you can become a member and pay for it annually. In the Caribbean, we don't have that kind of option. So that's how we produce some of our content, but to be honest, we are on air 24/7, and a station that's on air 24/7 with 3 producers can't produce all the content you need every day for that kind of rotation. So we produce some stuff or in-house. Our newscast and current affairs programming is produced in-house, but we also get content from other regional supporters. So only this year I got Altogether Sing from Jamaica, from Claire, from TVJ. We've gotten some stuff as well from other independent producers, not just around the region, but locally as well.
Okay, that's very clear and very interesting. And we'll delve into some of the angles that you are already introducing. Keith, BBC Jamaica, also a public broadcaster. In your case, what sort of funding monetization model are you using to run the station? Is it like you was describing a necessity, this combination of multiple sources? And also, do you produce all content yourself, or do you also acquire programming from external sources, just as you was mentioning? I think you're muted.
Yeah, let me try and clarify some things before I directly answer your question. One, we are not FTA at this present moment. We were never since the station begun, but there's a history to that. The PBCJ, Public Broadcasting Company for Jamaica, as you have indicated, was an act of parliament in 1997, thereabout. This came about after the Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation, which was owned by government, was sold to what Joel just mentioned, Television Jamaica, or the RJR, now Gleaner Media Group. In selling that entity, JBC, to this group, it sold lock, stock, and barrel the entire infrastructure that existed for free-to-air, including equipment and other operational apparatus that were required for free-to-air. That left just the physical plant that is now the PBCJ, in short, with absolutely no infrastructure for studio, broadcast, and distribution via FTA. The station began very humbly with a cable output, cable distribution,
okay,
which was minimal at the time when we started. We're still distributing our signal via cable, but we have come a far way in terms of reach. We now reach approximately 80% of our cable, of households with cable. And that is because the community cables and the licensed cable operators throughout the country, most of them were acquired by the 2 major telecom operators, Digicel and now Flow. They operate what we call national cable entities. and we are a must carry based on the license for the cable operators. Once you're a cable.
Hello and welcome everyone to this closing session of Nextv series Caribbean 2021. After spending the first part of the day discussing the latest developments and opportunities.
Oh, sorry, that was me.
Okay, there we go. I was also wondering where that was coming from. Sorry. So,
yeah. All right. To continue, what this has done is that it has restricted our distribution, our signal, or transmitting of our programs. And we have been making the case ever since I came on board as CEO since 2012 to expand and really make the PBCJ into a public broadcasting entity. Of course, as you would all agree, you're not public until your citizens have free access to what you are transmitting.
Yes, because at the moment, because of the way you describe the infrastructure, you necessarily have to pay for a cable subscription to access the...
Precisely. But because of the fact that the entire transmission background or backbone was sold, it's going to be taking a lot of investment and capital to go that route again. However, we are still in the process of trying to present a plan for that. In terms of reach, as I indicated, we only can now reach 70% or somewhere between 75 and 80% of households with cable. That to us is significant because the cable penetration is mostly in the populated areas, including our two major cities and towns. So coverage in terms of a population-wise is quite significant. Still, to become public, we have to have free-to-air. FTA is essential. You cannot be a public broadcaster unless you are free-to-air. In terms of the other question about funding, which is important, we are somewhat similar to what Joel just described. The act that created the PBCJ did indicate that at some time down the road, we would have to be footing the bill, so to speak, in terms of our operations, that we could not depend on public funding or the public or the government subvention, for eternity. No. To date, we're still being funded in that regard. And I see my other half just joined us, Odette.
Welcome. Long time.
Long time. Hi, Joel.
Hi.
Right on time.
My apologies. I tried logging in this morning and I had difficulties, so thanks.
Oh, you're right on time. So welcome to the discussion.
Yeah, and before I was distracted with that beautiful smile from Odette, let me just try and backtrack to where I was.
The funding.
Funding, okay.
Yeah.
So for funding from the government, they do take care of, happily so, and they still do, although our budget is somewhat every year, it's for one reason or another, it's reduced, but they do give us our salaries and other additional allowances that are tied to salaries, such as traveling and all of that. So that is secured. Salaries for staff is secure. But in terms of our operational expenses, we have to earn that. We do not advertise because we're not allowed to by the act to advertise. And so we have to do it by one, independent productions, both private and public. And we do get some of the funding from government agencies to create and produce a variety of things, PSAs right through to other productions, to PR productions, and so on and so forth for them. And we do have a large studio, but without equipment, that we obviously call a sound stage, that we rent that facility, and that brings in some income. But a significant amount of what we earn, apart from what I just told you, is from rental of premises. And by that I mean, the JBC was a large complex at the time. And with technology, we do not need all the buildings that is now located at the PBCJ. So we rent office spaces, and 75% of the office spaces is rented to government agencies. So those rentals are more or less guaranteed, except for one or two late payments and so on and so forth. So that's where most of our funding for operations come from. The other question you asked was programming. We operate a 24/7 distribution of content. Initially, it was only about, when I came on board in 2012, it wasn't 24/7. It was about, I'd say maybe about 12 hours a day. And it primarily concentrated and focused on they started out that way. No, when I came on board in 2012, they were actually operating 24/7. But a majority of our content came from the JBC archives, that we would re-edit some of them, and we would repeat those appropriately. Now we do operate, still do 24/7. A part of our content carrying is that of Parliament. We carry both lower and upper houses of Parliament live, unedited. Committee meetings of Parliament, that's carried live. And that's where we garner a lot of our viewership, because given the debates in the House, given what is happening, it does attract a large audience most of the time. We do produce a number of our programs. We are now at, I'd say, about 65% to 70% of our programs are local content, which would include Parliament. And we do acquire programs from overseas that we can afford. And that makes up our program schedule, so to speak. But it's important to note that you are, as you have indicated here, I thought I'd clarify that the PBCJ does not, or is not set up to broadcast to the general public government programs or government, whatever government produces. That is the responsibility of the Jamaica Information Service, although we have to dedicate some time for that kind of programming. Well, PBCJ is supposed to be neutral and independent of the government of the day. So I just wanted to make that note and to clarify that.
Thanks for clarifying that.
And yeah, our primary mandate is to preserve, promote, and to generate the kind of content that will keep our heritage and our culture going. So a lot of the programs we produce are cultural, educational, along that line. And just that is it in a nutshell.
Thanks a lot of clarifications there. Odette, welcome to the discussion. Both Jewel and Keith have very well introduced CBC Barbados and BBC Jamaica. Let's do the same with GBN. Again, the question is, what type of programming does the station broadcast? Do you produce all content yourself? Do you acquire content from external sources? and how does the station generate revenue? Advertising, sponsorships, state subventions. Hear from you and GBN.
Okay, so good afternoon, and my apologies for being late. I did try logging in earlier, and I was having some difficulties. So sorry about that.
You're here, no worries.
So the GBN, it is an offshoot of a government entity. In the 1970s, there was Radio Grenada, which was owned by the government, and then there was Grenada Television, which was a separate entity. And then they did a merger and formed it into a corporation. And then in 1988, the One Caribbean Media Grouping, which was then CCN, Caribbean Communications Network out of Trinidad and Tobago, they purchased the majority shares in the company. So we still have that operation where the majority shares is owned by One Caribbean Media, which is based in Port of Spain, Trinidad, with offshoots in Barbados, St. Lucia, and in some of the other islands where we have some radio stations, including Antigua, Montserrat. So basically, that's our genesis and our makeup in terms of the corporate structure. We solely depend on advertising. We get no subventions or support from the government. No direct support, that is, from the government. So we must tussle with everybody else in the market to be able to raise our revenues. In terms of programming, we do, like, I would say 80% local programming that we produced, and we would source 20% externally, including from our sister stations. Now, technology has worked for us. In 2015, we undertook a major upgrade. So a lot of what we do now to generate local content and to make our programming more interactive, we would, our radio side of the operation, so we have 3 radio stations and 1 television station. Yep. We would televise our radio programs. We have done a construct that allows us to be able to take radio and put it on television. We place a camera in the studio, so that helps a lot. On the television side, we do several current affairs programs. So every evening, almost of the week, we have a current affairs program that we run on Monday nights. We do Beyond the Headlines, which I host. It is the premier current affairs program. On Tuesdays, we do a medical program we call the Doctor on Call. On Wednesdays, we have a similar current affairs program, the Bob Report, which is produced out of New York, and it is shared here with us. One of our former employees is now based in Washington, and we syndicate that program from him. And then on Thursdays, we have a very interesting program called Release It, where whatever is on a person's mind in the community, they would be able to interact with the hosts and producers on that. And then we found a beautiful program on Fridays called We Culture, as in the French OUI, We Culture, which is, it has taken off like thunderbolt and lightning. So they would talk about back in the day and old time traditions, and that has proven to be a very rich experience. People from all over the diaspora logs in for that. Speaking of the diaspora, we have found with COVID-19, that's one of the positives that has come out of it, and what technology has allowed us to do. Because with people being in the US, in the UK, and other metropolitan cities, they want to know what's happening at home. And because we have been able to use Zoom effectively, we have been able to bring our people together, especially people in the diaspora. So the program on Fridays, we find we have a huge diaspora following because people miss home and they want to connect with the culture. So We Culture it's really taken off. One of the other things that we found as well is that because people have been confined by the pandemic, we have been able to, on a Saturday morning, we call it Market Vibes. So we use technology again, and we just go to one of the local markets, and show the food and the interaction and the culture and the craft. And again, that has a huge diaspora following. So yes, we've had to be creative in finding ways to sustain ourselves, because especially in light of COVID, we've had revenue cuts of about 50%, and it has really caused us to rethink our operations and our survivability, our sustainability. So those are some of the pressures that we face, but we have risen to the challenge, I must say.
And I'm going to be asking you some of the questions about the access to the diaspora later on. I think that's an interesting part. But on the last part of what you mentioned, a 50%, that's a dramatic reduction in presumably directly connected with the reduction of advertising revenue, right? Because of COVID, and we were saying in the introduction, it's what's been happening to stations throughout the world, and no exceptions here. Jewel, I imagine that 2020 must have been also a difficult year for GBN. Was this the case? And I particularly also like you to touch on the importance that foreign tourism has for the marketing and advertising ecosystem in general in Barbados. There's a direct connection, direct relationship there between the drop in tourism levels with the drop in advertising, right?
There is definitely a connection. The economy is an ecosystem. It's not, no sector of the economy stands on its own. It's all interconnected. 2020 has been a difficult year, and 2021, and we're still in it, has been an equally difficult year, because not only are we dealing with COVID, but then St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the La Soufrière volcano had an eruption, and the ash came to Barbados. So on top of the lockdowns for COVID, then we had additional lockdowns to deal with the volcanic ash. So it's been a rough year. Our advertising, we've seen it drop by as much as 70%. I'm sure it may be higher than that in elements, in parts of it. It may be higher than 70 at some stages, and just about 70 in others. And that's all because of tourism. Tourism is our major money earner. So if there are no tourists coming to Barbados, then there's no spend. So they're not staying in hotels. They're not going out to restaurants. They're not going shopping, none of that. So if they're not doing any of those things, and there's no money coming from any of those tourism related activities, then all the businesses that thrive off of tourism, they then are not making enough money to pay their employees, bring in new materials. And even that has been difficult, because with COVID, importing materials has doubled, in some cases tripled in cost, because your whole supply chain now is knocked out. So things are taking longer to get to Barbados. When they get to Barbados, they are obviously the distributor or whoever is bringing them in is going to pass on all of the increased costs to the consumer. So it's been rough, but we've had to find other ways of generating income by having different types of programming that allow us to generate income. And because of the innovation of it, we've managed to generate some income locally, but foreign tourism, that has definitely seriously impacted our ability to raise money, because without tourists on island, then all of the players that we will go to looking for funding, they don't have the money to spend, and they tell you that. Not to mention, we have a different dynamic as well. A lot of our major companies that we seek advertising from, their headquarters are in Trinidad. So whereas before you could go to a company and pitch them products or services that you have, those decisions are not taken in Barbados, they're taken in Trinidad, or in some instances in Jamaica. So you have to wait for the headquarters to get back to you to determine whether the answer is yes or no. And that too has impacted our ability to generate as much advertising revenue as normal. And it's everywhere. It's not just some areas and not others. It's in everything. It's from construction to supermarkets, distribution, almost in everything, even media. Odette just spoke about GBM being mostly owned now by One Caribbean Media. So a lot of the decisions that are taken, targets that are set, etc., are set at headquarters. And sometimes those targets are so far from the reality on the ground. Odette is laughing, so I know she knows what I mean. The reality of the targets set in some quarters are so far from the reality on the ground that staff will tell you, look, these are the targets we have to set. We keep telling them, yes, Barbados may have an more upwardly mobile population, so therefore our GDP is a little higher than maybe some others, but that doesn't mean that the market can that the local market can absorb these costs. But they're still insisting that this is the target you have to reach. So we're working with those variables but no doubt about it, it's been a rough year. And we don't expect that even if things pick up, they're not going to pick up to where they were pre-COVID overnight. I think we're going to be in this kind of depressed economic state for at least another year to 18 months.
Keith, do you agree?
Yes, I agree, except that we benefited some way from COVID in terms of revenue generation. Because of the facility that we have, and because it still is the largest, I believe, still is the largest drive-in studio facility in the Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean. And as I described it as a soundstage, because of the virtual meetings and virtual concerts and things of that nature, that we benefit from rental of our facility for a number of those events. And I give you one example, Sunsplash, which was an annual event, musical event over a week, which brought a lot of tourists to Jamaica and a lot of music from all over. But that was staged virtually, and we benefited from putting on that in our studio. It was reduced to 3 days, but we had the studio rented for about 2 weeks because of setup and
rehearsals and stuff
and those things. So we benefit in that way from the COVID experience. But we share the same, although we are not commercially driven. We share what the other rest of the stations are experiencing.
Okay. Odette, I'd like to touch on some of the streaming possibilities that are now available for traditional free-to-air stations. And I wanted to come back when you mentioned how important your content became to your international, to your expat community around the world who wanted to know what was going on and no possibility to travel. So what online and social media platforms does GBN run? How are those communities accessing that content? I'm sure they're doing it somehow over the internet. And I'm wondering how useful are them as a sort of a catch-up in some cases and linear web simulcast tools for your online communities? Are you putting them content that was already broadcast? Is it only a live simulcast of your main screen? How is that working on at the moment?
So we have kept it very basic and simple. We basically use our website, which is gbn.gd. And we have all of the radio stations and the television stations streamed there. And then we use the two main social media channels for the time being, which is Facebook, and we have a YouTube channel. So those are two main portals of connectivity with people in the diaspora, and it has proven to work very well. So our content, we stream it live, and then it's left on the social media channels and on the Facebook page so that people can access it. They have content on demand.
Okay, okay. Jewel, in your case, what does your online offering consist of at the moment?
Well, we really had with the pandemic and everybody at home, one of the things we really had to do was update our online platform. So we've been doing much more on Facebook than we were doing before, and we relaunched our YouTube channel. That allowed us to do what we do on Saturday nights. Now we're in second season of it, which is something called the stay-at-home party. So you're on lockdown, you can't go out, everything is closed, but we provide a party in the studio with DJs and dancers and live performances. We've been able to offer that now, whereas before as free to air, you could only see it if you lived in Barbados. Because we're offering it on our platforms, the diaspora can see it, and that has really taken off. I mean, we knew it would be successful, but I think it took off beyond our wildest dreams. We even have brands asking us if they can sponsor an entire stand-home party, and we've had that where one of our food distributors, Brunswick, which has a line of tuna and sardines and stuff, they brought in a new product. So they launched it on the stand-home party with giveaways, etc. We've had another distributor that tied 8 of their brands to the stay-at-home party, and not only that, but brought in two major local bands as well, Square One and Crossfire, to perform live in studio. We've had amazing response to that in terms of the numbers on our social media platforms have just skyrocketed with people tuning in. So that has really worked for us. Over from February this year to now, our revenue just from that alone, and the other things we've done, we had a gospel concert because we didn't want our audience to think that we were only about partying. So we had a gospel concert on Easter Monday. For Mother's Day, we had Brain Fit, which is a game show. And our revenues have jumped by 20% just in these few months and doing that. But I think part of it too is we were forced to work with some of the industry players. So we work with a company that provides huge LED screens and digital screens. We work with a company that provides lighting, etc. So our sets look vastly different to how they looked before. They look fresh, they look modern. Just before this started, remember I asked to push back a little bit because I was moderating a panel discussion on where is the economy of Barbados going to go and the international business sector, and a publisher here who wanted that conversation came to us because he could get it locally produced, but also it would go on our Facebook pages and our YouTube channel, and it would go on his as well, and therefore it would be available to his audience overseas. So it has really taken us in directions that I don't think we would have gone before were it not for COVID. Necessity is the mother of invention.
It is. Absolutely. Keith, you have a career, an impressive career in broadcast television that spans over 35 years. I was interesting, you started as a cameraman at the now defunct Jamaican Broadcasting Corporation to become the CEO of BBC Jamaica. What is really the biggest change or trend that you would single out as having affected over-the-air television in Jamaica and the Caribbean during the past few years?
What comes to mind immediately is the advent of cable television. From its early days to now, where there is a proliferation of various means of accessing content. And I think that has affected us in a negative way. But what it has also done, on the other hand, for free-to-air television, it has brought about a certain consciousness of those of us in the business to say that, look, we have to find other ways and means of keeping our audience, attracting our audience. And we found that out to be local production, and not only local productions, but quality local productions that we could possibly export. And I think although it has affected us in terms of our viewership, giving people more choices, it's a good thing. But apart from that, it has, I said before, pushed us in a direction that we weren't looking at, because we were mostly free to air. We were looking at a lot of distribution programs. We would buy programs from overseas. And because when compared to producing local content, it was much cheaper when you think about it. But what we found negatively again is that it came along with all the baggage, depending on where you would buy your programs from. It affected our culture to a certain degree. But what we have found out, which is a positive, is that with local programs of quality, viewers will come back to free to air. They will come back because they want to see themselves. And somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was Odette or Joel, who spoke about a particular program on a Saturday morning when people would sit down and reminisce. Right. Those are the kind of things that you don't get on cable television. Those are the kind of things you don't get from overseas. We in the Caribbean have a very rich culture. From country to country, we are very rich. Our music, our sports, our food, things of that nature. Once we focus and concentrate on that, which we're trying to do, our audience will come back.
Can I also add to what Keith is saying? That's very true. Because our budgets are small and our territories are small, the cost of purchasing international content is sometimes in a lot of cases just outside of our budget. We just can't afford it. We haven't bought any international programming it has got to be more than 10 years because we just can't afford it. But what we have done is focused more on improving the quality of our local content. But that being said, small as we are still judged by the deep pockets of the network, the international networks and the streaming services. I think the thing that has kept our audience coming back has been that at the end of the day, your local terrestrial station is the only place you can see you. You can't see you on Netflix. You can't see you on Paramount or Peacock or any of those other BritBox, any of those other internationals. You can only see things that relate to you as a Caribbean person on your local station. One of the other things too was that during the pandemic, when the Ministry of Health and the Prime Minister were giving constant press conferences and updates as to what was happening in terms of the management of the pandemic, people came to us because they felt that it was a reliable service. When you watched it, you knew that this was where you could get reliable, credible information. Anything else on Facebook and stuff was just misinformation. So I think those things have helped. And I think as we continue, we need to focus more on that, on creating content that is specific to where we are. I'd really like us to do more in terms of coming together as a region and offering regional content so that we can see each other. We are so close. It takes me, half hour by plane to get to Odette? And yet we know so little about each other. And I think that that's something that we really need to look at more. The same way there's a Netflix, we should have a regional streaming service where when I log on, I can see series out of Grenada, and Jamaica, and Trinidad, and Virgin Islands, and wherever, because we need to see us more. So and Keith was right when he talked about the baggage that comes with international programming. Their values and mores are different. And you have to be very careful what you purchase.
No, but it would make all the sense. I mean, you're describing a situation where it becomes extremely difficult to buy foreign content. At the same time, you can see the value of your local production is what your people want to see. And you could easily become in a situation, you have so many islands, each with their own individualities, where the content that each of you are producing could be put together in a streaming service that would become unique, right? Based on what you're saying, there's nothing like that at the moment.
There's not.
After being OTT platforms that are going to come and produce locally, at least for the time being. So you should do it. There's an idea there. Speaking on streaming services, are there, and I'm asking this question to three of you, any plans? Because the next step beyond having a Facebook, a YouTube outlet, digital outlet, would be having an app to allow users to access your content that way. Is that something that is a consideration? Are there any plans on that? Let's start with either Jewel or Odette.
I know we would need to upgrade our apps. Our apps don't allow you to do that at the moment, but that's something we need to look at. Our reality is that as the market changes, because even when we go to the market and said, okay, we have this production, they will tell you, I can spend less money and get wider reach on streaming platforms or on YouTube or on Facebook. So our advertising revenue is dropping as well. So I think we would definitely need to upgrade our apps so that it allows us to offer that as well. And we do need to do that. We need to look at things like video on demand so that if I missed whatever program it is, I should be able to go back and watch it at a time, because that's really the attraction of streaming platforms, that I can watch it when I want on the device that I have, whenever I want. I can stay home on my couch and binge watch it, whatever. Terrestrial TV doesn't offer that. And I think that's something that we need to move towards in terms of being able to keep our audiences engaged. I'm sure Keith and Odette will agree with me that if you do a survey of their audience, a lot of our audience is senior citizens. There are people who've grown up with the stations, and it's difficult to attract a younger audience because the younger audience is so used to being able to sit on a bus and watch Netflix or their favorite sports program or whatever. You can't do that with terrestrial. So we would really need to upgrade our apps and our platforms and our equipment. Let us not forget our equipment and technology in order to be able to offer those things, because we definitely need to look for alternative revenue streams. The days when we could create content and sell it, you can no longer do that and exist off of it. You have to have alternative revenue streams, and not even within media. I know One Caribbean Media, one of the things it does, at least the Nation here in Barbados, apart from being a newspaper, they also offer magazines. They're now doing something called Nation Connect, which is almost like a classified service. So you have to look for alternative revenue streams to support your organization, because you're not going to be able to pay your bills off of making content and selling it. That's just not viable anymore.
Okay, interesting. Odette, what's your view?
I agree with Drew 100%, because we've also found that to be the case, where we have an aging population, people who grew up with the stations, and now all of our programs, to know whether we're gaining traction, we look on the social media feeds to see what kind of following we have. And we were able to see it during the pandemic. So as Drew mentioned, when the government would have held the press conferences, they would go to her station because they knew it was, we say, cocoa well pressed. We have found that to be the case as well, where other stations might seem to be popular when they play music, but let there be a national emergency, GBN becomes the go-to station for the information. And we have also found it necessary to tweak our offerings and not just limit it to terrestrial, because we realize these young people, we want to capture them, we have to go where they are, and we have to find them on their cell phones, and we have to find them wherever they are. And that's why we found, like, in the last 10 years or so, we were doing surveys where we saw the decline. You ask young people what was in the news and they couldn't tell you. My children would tell me, like, Mommy, I'm not going to sit in front of the television and look at the news. If you put the news on your Facebook page, I look at it when I wake up in the morning. So I listen to that. And now we've had a greater uptake. When we look at the demographics on the social media feeds, we see that we've had an increase in the young people following it.
Okay. Yes, Keith, go ahead.
Well, all I can say is that I echo exactly what the two ladies have said. That's the direction. That's what we have to do, and we are beginning to invest in that kind of apparatus, that kind of equipment. That's the only way we can go.
That's the only way to go. Not only that, their attention span is so much shorter than ours. So I will sit and watch a 1-hour newscast. I don't have any kids, but my niece, she's not sitting to watch it. So what we started doing is doing extracts of the news and putting it on Facebook so you can see pieces of it, but not that you have to sit and watch a whole 1-hour newscast, because nobody's watching that. But what we have done is, because people have other activities going on in their life. Some people go to the gym after work, they go to the supermarket, so they may miss the 7 o'clock newscast. What we do is repeat it at night at 10:30. So if you miss it at 7, there's still an opportunity to catch up at 10:30. Those are the kind of strategies we've had to employ in order to keep our audience. I must admit, the Stand Home Party has certainly brought a lot of young people to our platform. I was surprised. From the time the flyer comes out that says who the DJs are for this week or who the performers are for this week, people are logged on. My director, Sam, tells me when he sends out. And not only that, it's not just about having it. We also have a Zoom room So we send out a link. You can log into the Zoom room. There's no fee. You can just log in. And then throughout the program on the night, as we're producing it, we bring up the Zoom room so you can see different people in the Zoom. People love that. They love to see themselves. There are opportunities to win prizes, but you have to have your camera on in the Zoom. So that has been very, very helpful as well. But they're right. We really need to apply alternative strategies in order to just keep abreast and stay afloat business-wise and culture-wise.
True. Well said. I might just add this, and I'm saying it seriously, but at the same time, it's laughable. I'm going to miss COVID because I had a certain amount of exclusivity when the press conferences will be called. Because PBCJ as a public broadcasting station, we had to be there. And the other stations would take our feed. And if they consider it, if it's not the Prime Minister or that seriously, but social media, our numbers went up, although once there's anything that has to do with announcement with COVID coming from the government, we were the go-to station. So I'm gonna miss it.
I'm gonna miss COVID because it forced us to look at our business different, a business model different. It forced us to rethink how we do things. There was a time when you could not tell any supervisor at this organization that you wanted to work from home. Now people work from home on a regular. Those kind of things in terms of how it forced us to reinvent our business. And whereas before you would talk for years and nothing would happen, we had no choice but to reinvent our business in a matter of weeks, in some instances, days. I'll give you an example. Over the Christmas period, we had a spike in COVID cases. We had a management meeting the Wednesday, and by the Monday, we had a brand new program called the Morning Report, which gave you an update on what was happening COVID-wise and all of the other stories coming out that would have happened overnight. So, and that happened in a matter of days. Normally, if you want to do a new program, you have to have all these sit-down conversations and go to marketing for the plan, go to discuss with the financial controller about the budget and if we can afford it. None of that. Definitely in 2-2, it was on air. And that assisted us, that kind of fast turnover assisted us as well in terms of the volcanic ash. In no time, the volcanic ash started this Friday. By the Saturday, we were doing a 2-hour program called Tracking La Soufrière, in which we were reaching out to people across the region, especially in St. Vincent, about what was happening, plans Barbados was making, giving advice on how to clean up the ash, et cetera, et cetera. And we ran that for 2 weeks. So it certainly has forced us to reinvent our business model, to be more efficient, but certainly to be far more aggressive in responding to events as they happen.
Very, very interesting. And to sort of certify the importance again of ask Netflix to tell your viewers what's going on with the ashes coming in. I mean, that's really, that's where your key role comes in. I want to thank you very much, Odette, Jewel, Keith, for your insightful comments during this session. This really brings our inaugural edition of Nextv series Caribbean to a successful end. I wouldn't have thought that we were going to end with "I will miss COVID" as one of the catchlines of the event, but that's what happened. We hope really that you have found the conference as interesting as we have. And we look forward to welcoming you soon to one of our upcoming conferences or webinars. We want to especially thank the sponsors who made this event possible. So thank you to our silver sponsors, Broadpeak, Mirada, and Tivo. Thank you to our bronze sponsors, Nagra and Ross Video. Have a nice evening and please stay safe, everyone. See you soon. Goodbye.
The same to you, Juan and Sylvia. Thank you for inviting us. We don't get opportunities to do this very often, and maybe coming out of COVID, this is something else that we need to do as well. That we as media managers in the region need to come together more often to be able to have these conversations, because all that, I'm telling you now, that market vibes, I'm teething it.
Not a problem. Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Joel,
Yes.
you need to come back to the CBU.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Networking.